In my view, one of the most compelling arguments for God's existence is the moral argument. And this argument is predicated on the idea that there are objective moral values. Yet some skeptics have challenged this argument by focusing on whether or not there truly are objective moral values. And one of the ways in which they do this is by arguing that there are times where objective moral values seem to be in conflict with each other. How do we defend against that challenge? I'm joined today by Dr. Travis Campbell, who is a Christian scholar, to help us with that very issue. Travis, when it comes to the notion of objective moral values, what happens when objective moral values are in conflict? And is that a reason to reject the moral argument for God's existence?
Well, if the objectivist can't answer this question, I do think that calls into question the existence of objective moral principles, or at least the existence of many objective moral principles. And that further would weaken the argument, because if we have no good reason to think that objective moral values exist, or if we have a reason to reject their existence, then the whole argument is called into question, and we don't really have a case for God's existence. And I think that a pragmatic problem that relativists have raised against objectivists is a legitimate one. What do you do when two values conflict with one another? And
so, for example, we're not to commit murder and we're not to lie.
Yes.
So what happens if we have to lie to prevent somebody from losing their life through an act of murder?
Sure. In fact, in Nazi Germany, there were Germans in general and Christians in particular who were faced with that very dilemma, and different Christians responded in different ways. You know, one response is to say you should never lie. Immanuel Kant was such a believer in objective moral values that he said that they are just things you have to hold to come hell or high water. He was very stoic. Let justice reign that the heavens may fall. I will never lie. And there were some Germans, Christians, who followed Kant in that area. Corrie ten Boom's family did. So when the Germans asked them, are there Jews in your home? They said, yes, they're under the kitchen table. And they went and looked on the kitchen table and rolled their eyes and assumed that they were just kidding or just fooling them or whatever. But the ten Booms didn't lie, because the Jews were under the kitchen table. They were in the cellar or in the basement under the kitchen table. But generally, I think it is good to lie to save a life. I think that the ten Booms, though commendable in their application of ethics, I think interpreted God's moral law wrongly. Christians have generally accepted what is called hierarchical objectivism. And in order to sort of flesh out what this is, it's important that I make a distinction now between value and principle. I haven't really distinguished those two ideas up until this point. A value is something that you uphold as ideal or most important in your life. And the two fundamental values of the Christian is God and humanity. God is our highest good, our summum bonum. He is the greatest conceivable being. And therefore, he must be what we value absolutely or to the uttermost. But then the other value would be humanity. Insofar as we're made in the image of God, and we have intrinsic value. And this is why Jesus says the two greatest commandments is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, given these two values, all moral principles are relative to them. They come to subserve them. And so the moral principle, for example, not to lie, is given because we want to preserve and respect and uphold the dignity and value of our fellow man. And so if you go out and you lie to a person asks you a question and you just tell a bold-faced lie, you're basically saying you don't respect that individual. When a student cheats on a test, they are basically saying to the teacher, to their fellow students and even to themselves that they don't respect anyone in the classroom. They don't uphold them as valuable individuals. And so this is why we don't lie. However, if the Nazi knocks on your door and says, "Are there Jews in the cellar?" and if there are in fact Jews in the cellar, and you tell the truth, you're basically following the moral principle not to lie. But it's a principle given for the sake of preserving human life, not for jettisoning human life. And so you're basically following the principle in such a way that it undermines the very reason that the principle existed in the first place. And this is why most Christian ethicists would say that in that situation, the higher value, which is to preserve human life, is to render the principle "do not lie" invalid in this situation.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is that by actually telling the lie, you are actually helping the person you're lying to, because if you told the truth, they would actually take a human life. So you actually are protecting two people by telling that lie.
That's exactly right. You're actually preserving the moral law in a higher sense by keeping one person from committing the murder, which is actually showing your respect and dignity towards him. I'm repeating your point in a sense. And you're also preserving the lives of those who you're trying to save. And the Bible is replete with examples where this sort of hierarchical objectivism, Norman Geisler calls this graded absolutism, is given. For example, the narrator of the Exodus commends the Hebrew midwives for lying to preserve the lives of the young Hebrew babies that are being killed by Pharaoh. And this is why Jesus says to the Pharisees, you nullify the lesser matters of the law, or you nullify the greater matters of the law, the weightier matters, for the sake of the lesser. And he says, you strain at a gnat and you swallow a camel. So Jesus recognized that there was a hierarchy in God's law that we should preserve and fight for.